The dusty stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the weathered ranch house just as Owen Lancaster finished breaking a stubborn mare in the corral. And the woman who stepped down into the September sun of 1876 held a leather folder that would change everything he thought he knew about his life. She was tall for a woman, with dark auburn hair pinned beneath a practical traveling hat, and her green eyes scanned the property with an assessment that made Owen's jaw tighten. He'd been running the Double L Ranch in Redding, California, for 8 years since his father died, building it from a struggling cattle operation into something that mattered. The last thing he needed was some city woman showing up unannounced. Owen wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve and walked toward the house, his boots kicking up small clouds of red dust. The woman was already at his porch steps, one gloved hand resting on the railing. Up close, he could see the determination in her face, the set of her shoulders that spoke of someone who'd traveled a long way with purpose. "Can I help you, madam?" Owen kept his voice neutral, though his heart had started beating faster. Something about the way she looked at his home made his stomach clench. "Are you Owen Lancaster?" Her voice was clear and educated, with a hint of East Coast refinement that didn't belong in the dry California heat. "I am, and you are, Sophia Hayes." She held out the leather folder. "I believe we need to have a conversation about this property." Owen didn't take the folder immediately. His foreman, Carlos, had stopped working near the barn and was watching with undisguised curiosity. The other ranch hands were pretending not to notice, but Owen knew every ear was tuned to this exchange. What kind of conversation? Owen's voice had gone cold. Sophia's expression softened slightly, and for the first time he saw something other than determination in her eyes. There was sadness there and maybe sympathy. The kind that's better had inside with coffee or whatever you have available. "Please, Mr. Lancaster, I didn't travel 2,000 miles to stand in your yard." Something in her tone made Owen relent. He gestured toward the house. "After you." The interior of the ranch house was simple but clean. Owen had never bothered much with decoration, but his mother's old curtains still hung in the windows, and the furniture his father had built still filled the rooms. It was a bachelor's space, functional and spare, and he felt suddenly self-conscious about it as Sophia looked around. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the table. He moved to the stove where a pot of coffee had been sitting since morning. It would be strong and bitter, but it was what he had. He poured 2 tin cups and brought them to the table, setting one in front of her. "Let's talk." Sophia removed her gloves carefully, folding them beside her on the table. Her hands were surprisingly calloused for someone who looked so refined. She opened the leather folder and withdrew a sheaf of papers, spreading them carefully on the worn wood. "My mother was Elizabeth Hayes," she began. "Before she married my father, she was Elizabeth Whitmore." Owen's blood went cold. "Whitmore? I see you recognize the name." Sophia's voice was gentle now, as if she could sense his rising panic. "Your father, Thomas Lancaster, and my grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, were business partners. In 1858, they purchased this land together with the intention of building a cattle ranch. The deed was drawn up in both their names, each owning 50%. That's impossible." Owen's voice came out harsh. "My father built this ranch alone. He never mentioned any partner." Sophia slid a document across the table. It was yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Owen forced himself to read it, his eyes scanning the formal language until he found the words that confirmed his worst fear. Thomas Lancaster and Margaret Whitmore were indeed listed as equal owners of the property that would become the Double L Ranch. "My grandmother died in 1860, Sophia continued. "She left her share to my mother, her only child. My mother died last year." She paused, and Owen saw her swallow hard. I'm her only child, which means the 50% ownership passes to me. Owen pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. He walked to the window, staring out at the land he'd poured his sweat and blood into for nearly a decade. The cattle dotting the far pastures, the new barn he'd built 2 years ago, the corrals he'd repaired and expanded. Every inch of it was his, or so he'd believed. Why now? His voice was rough. Why wait until now to show up? Because I didn't know. Sophia's reply was quiet but firm. My grandmother and mother were estranged. My mother left California when she was 17 and never came back. She married my father in Boston and rarely spoke of her life before. It wasn't until she died and I went through her papers that I found the deed and the letters. Letters from your father. Sophia withdrew another stack of papers from the folder. He wrote to my grandmother every year, sending her share of the profits. After she died, he wrote to my mother. The last letter is dated 1868. Owen turned, frowning. I never saw any letters. I managed the books after Pa died in 1868. There was no mention of any partner, no payments going to anyone named Whitmore or Hayes. That's because my mother never responded to any of the letters. She didn't want the money. She'd built a new life in Boston with my father, who was a banker. They were comfortable. The ranch was part of a past she'd left behind. Sophia's fingers traced the edge of one of the letters. But the deed remained valid. The partnership remained legally binding. Owen came back to the table, slumping into his chair. He picked up his coffee cup and drank deeply, not caring that it burned his throat. His mind was racing, trying to understand what this meant. Half the ranch. She owned half of everything he'd built. So what do you want? The question came out more aggressive than he'd intended. You here to claim your inheritance, sell your half to some land speculator, break up the ranch. Sophia met his eyes steadily. I'm here because I have nowhere else to go. The admission startled him. Owen studied her more carefully, seeing past his own anger to really look at her. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably no more than 25. There were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion, and now that he looked closer, her traveling dress was well made but worn at the edges. The leather folder was scuffed, the papers inside handled many times. What happened? His voice had lost its edge. Sophia took a breath, her hands wrapping around the coffee cup as if needing its warmth despite the September heat. My father died 2 years ago. He'd made some bad investments, and we discovered he'd been borrowing against the bank to cover losses. When he died, the bank seized everything to cover the debts. My mother's death last year was partly from grief, partly from the pneumonia she caught in the cheap boarding house where we'd moved. I've been working as a seamstress, but it's barely enough to survive. When I found these papers, I realized I had a choice. I could sell the deed to someone in Boston who offered me $500 for it, or I could come west and see what I actually own. $500 would have been easier, Owen said. Easier isn't always better. Sophia lifted her chin. And the man who offered it had the look of someone who planned to use that deed to cause trouble for whoever was running this ranch. I may need money, Mr. Lancaster, but I'm not interested in destroying someone's livelihood to get it. They sat in silence for a moment. Owen could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of the house settling in the heat. Everything familiar, and yet suddenly foreign. He tried to imagine what his father must have thought, maintaining a partnership with someone who never acknowledged his letters, never claimed her share. Had he hoped the Whitmore family had forgotten? Or had he always known that someday someone would come with that deed? I need to see proof, Owen said finally. No offense, Miss Hayes, but I need to take these documents to a lawyer, make sure they're legitimate. Of course, Sophia nodded. I expected nothing less. I have no desire to claim something that isn't rightfully mine. But I'm confident in what you'll find. I had a lawyer in Boston examine everything before I made the journey. Reading has a lawyer, John Patterson. He's honest. I'll take the papers to him tomorrow. Owen ran a hand through his dark hair. In the meantime, I suppose you need a place to stay. I have money for the hotel in town. Don't be ridiculous. The words came out before Owen could think better of them. If you own half this ranch, you're not paying to stay in town. The house has 2 bedrooms. You can take my parents' old room. I'll have Carlos's wife, Maria, come up from their cottage to serve as chaperone so there's no impropriety. Sophia looked surprised. That's very generous, considering I just upended your life. Owen managed something that wasn't quite a smile. Let's say I'm reserving judgment until I know for certain that you're telling the truth. If you are, then you own half this house anyway, and if you're not, well, I'll be taking you to the sheriff instead of the hotel. Fair enough. Sophia extended her hand across the table. Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Owen shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip and those unexpected calluses again. Whatever else Sophia Hayes might be, she wasn't afraid of work. That counted for something in his book. The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. Maria arrived with her usual cheerful efficiency, delighted to have another woman in the house for the first time since Owen's mother had passed. She set about making up the spare bedroom while Sophia retrieved her trunk from the stagecoach stop in town. Owen found himself watching Sophia move around the ranch, seeing how she took in every detail. She stopped to admire the horses, ran her hand along the corral fence with an evaluating touch, and stood for a long time looking out at the rolling hills where his cattle grazed. It's beautiful, she said when she noticed him watching. The letters your father wrote described it, but I couldn't really imagine it. Boston is all brick and cobblestones. This is so open, so alive. It's hard work, Owen replied. Beautiful doesn't pay the bills. I'm not afraid of hard work. There was something defensive in her tone. I know I look like a city woman, but I can learn. If this ranch is half mine, I should understand how it operates. Owen wanted to argue, to say that ranching wasn't something you learned from a few days of observation. But something in her expression stopped him. There was determination there, and a kind of desperation that he recognized. She'd lost everything and traveled across a continent on the hope that these papers would give her a future. He could respect that kind of courage, even if it complicated his life immeasurably. We'll see what the lawyer says first, he said instead. No point planning ahead until we know where we stand. That evening, Maria insisted on cooking a proper dinner, shooing Owen out of the kitchen and enlisting Sophia's help. Owen retreated to the porch with Carlos, who'd come up ostensibly to report on the day's work but really to satisfy his curiosity. She really owns half the ranch. Carlos asked in Spanish, which he knew Owen spoke fluently after years of working together. Maybe, Owen replied in the same language, if the papers are legitimate. And if they are, Owen didn't have an answer. He stared out at the sunset painting the California sky in shades of orange and gold, the same sunset he'd watched thousands of times, and tried to imagine sharing all of this with a stranger. The ranch wasn't just his livelihood, it was his identity. Everything he was had been poured into this land. I don't know, he admitted finally. I honestly don't know. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Maria had outdone herself with a beef stew and fresh bread, and Sophia proved to be good company. She asked intelligent questions about the ranch, about Reading, about California. In turn, she told stories about Boston, about her life before everything fell apart. Owen found himself laughing at her description of trying to navigate society gatherings with her mother while wearing dresses they'd mended 3 times over, pretending they hadn't fallen from grace. The worst part was the pity, Sophia said, her green eyes shadowed with memory. Everyone knew what had happened with my father's bank. They'd smile and offer sympathy while secretly being glad it wasn't them. After my mother died, they couldn't get away from me fast enough. Poverty isn't just about lacking money, it's about becoming invisible. Out here, everyone works, Owen said. Rich, poor, in between, there's no hiding it. That's refreshing, Sophia replied. Honest. After dinner, Owen showed Sophia around the property properly, pointing out the boundaries he knew, explaining the operation. They had nearly 200 head of cattle, plus the horses. There were 3 permanent ranch hands besides Carlos, and they hired additional help during roundup and branding. The ranch sold beef to the army fort 50 miles north and to the mining towns in the mountains. It was profitable, but not wealthy. Every dollar went back into expanding the herd or improving the infrastructure. Your father would be proud, Sophia said as they stood watching the last light fade from the sky. The letters made it sound like he started with almost nothing. He did. Him and my mother lived in a 1-room cabin right where the barn is now. They built this life board by board, fence post by fence post. Owen's voice was rough with emotion. That's why I need to know the truth about this partnership. I need to understand why he never told me. Maybe he thought the Whitmore family would never come back, Sophia suggested. Maybe it was easier to let it be forgotten, or maybe he felt guilty. The words came out before Owen could stop them. Maybe he knew he should have done more to track down his partner's heirs, but didn't want to split what he'd built. That's not the man his letters describe, Sophia said firmly. Every letter talks about hoping to hear back, about wanting to make sure his partner's daughter was getting her fair share. He sent money, Mr. Lancaster, money that was never claimed. That doesn't sound like someone trying to cheat his partners. Owen wanted to believe her, but trust didn't come easily to him. We'll know more tomorrow. The night was long. Owen lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, hearing the unfamiliar sounds of someone else in the house. Maria had gone back to her cottage after ensuring Sophia was settled, promising to return early in the morning. The ranch creaked and settled around him, and Owen's mind wouldn't quiet. He kept thinking about his father, about all the years they'd worked side by side, and the things that had gone unspoken. His father had been a quiet man, given more to action than words. Had he carried the secret of the partnership like a burden? Or had it simply been forgotten in the daily work of survival? Morning came too slowly and too fast. Owen was up before dawn as usual, tending to the animals and checking in with the hands. When he returned to the house, he found Sophia already dressed and in the kitchen with Maria, learning how to make tortillas. Her hair was tied back simply, and she'd changed into a more practical dress that had seen better days. The sleeves were rolled up, revealing those calloused hands again as she worked the dough under Maria's patient instruction. "Good morning," Sophia said, looking up with a smile that transformed her face. In the morning light, with flour on her cheek and her guard down, she looked younger and more vulnerable. "Maria is teaching me to be useful. She's a quick learner," Maria said approvingly in her accented English. "And strong hands. You can tell a lot about a person by their hands." Owen poured himself coffee, watching the 2 women work together. It felt strange having this domesticity in his house again after so many years of bachelor life. Strange, but not entirely unwelcome. He pushed the thought away. "I'm riding into town after breakfast," he said. "You should come with me. Patterson will want to see you, ask questions." "Of course," Sophia nodded. Should I bring anything else besides the documents, just yourself and the truth? The ride into Reading was quiet. Owen kept a horse saddled for Sophia, a gentle mare named Daisy who wouldn't spook easily. He'd expected Sophia to be nervous around horses, to need help mounting, but she swung into the saddle with practiced ease that surprised him. "You ride," he observed as they set out. "I learned as a girl. My mother's family had horses before we moved to Boston. It's been years, but you don't forget." Sophia adjusted her seat, finding her balance. "This is much better than the stagecoach." Reading in 1876 was a growing town, benefiting from both the railroad and the timber industry. The main street was lined with businesses: a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a church, and near the end, John Patterson's law office. Owen tied their horses to the rail outside and held the door for Sophia. Patterson was a gray-haired man in his 50s, known for his fairness and his thorough approach to legal matters. He looked up from his desk as they entered, his eyebrows rising in curiosity. "Owen, didn't expect to see you today. What brings you to town?" Then his eyes shifted to Sophia and his expression became more puzzled. "And with a lady, no less. John, this is Miss Sophia Hayes. She arrived yesterday with some documents I need you to examine." Owen's voice was steady, but Patterson had known him long enough to hear the undercurrent of tension. They spent the next 2 hours in Patterson's office while the lawyer examined every document Sophia had brought. He pulled out deed records, read the letters, compared signatures, and asked Sophia detailed questions about her family history. Owen sat silently, his stomach in knots, while Sophia answered everything with calm precision. Finally, Patterson sat back in his chair and removed his spectacles, polishing them with a handkerchief. "Well," he said heavily, "I can confirm that these documents are legitimate. The original deed is properly recorded and legally binding. Miss Hayes is indeed the rightful owner of 50% of the Double L Ranch." Owen felt the words like a physical blow, even though he'd been expecting them. Hearing it officially from a lawyer made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "What does that mean exactly?" Sophia asked. "What are our options?" Patterson leaned forward, his expression serious. "You have several. First, Miss Hayes could sell her share to Mr. Lancaster, assuming he has the capital to purchase it. Second, Mr. Lancaster could sell his share to Miss Hayes. Third, you could dissolve the partnership and divide the assets, though that would likely mean selling the ranch entirely and splitting the proceeds. Fourth, you could maintain the partnership and operate the ranch together." "What would half the ranch be worth?" Owen asked, his voice tight. Patterson considered. "Given the current cattle prices, the land value, the buildings and improvements, I'd estimate around $5,000 for a 50% share." Owen felt his heart sink. He didn't have $5,000. He could maybe scrape together $2,000 if he sold cattle and borrowed against the property, but $5,000 was impossible. The improvements he'd made had increased the value beyond what he could afford to buy out. "I don't have that kind of money," he admitted, hating the words even as he said them. "And I don't have any money," Sophia added. "That's why I came west instead of selling the deed in Boston." Patterson nodded as if he'd expected this. "Then your realistic options are to sell the ranch entirely and split the proceeds, or to maintain the partnership. I should tell you that the original partnership agreement drawn up by your father and grandmother is quite detailed. It specifies that both partners have equal say in the operation, equal claim to profits, and equal responsibility for losses and debts. It's designed to be a working partnership, not a silent investment." "Meaning what exactly?" Owen asked. "Meaning Miss Hayes can't just collect money while you do all the work. She has the right to participate in decisions about the ranch's operation, and you can't force her out or make major decisions without her agreement. Patterson looked between them. Essentially, you either need to find a way to work together or you need to sell. Owen stood abruptly, walking to the window. Sell the ranch. Sell the land his father had built from nothing, the cattle he'd raised, the life he'd made. It was unthinkable. But the alternative was working with a stranger, someone who knew nothing about ranching, someone who could interfere with every decision he made. Could I have a moment alone with Mr. Lancaster? Sophia's voice was quiet but firm. Patterson nodded and stepped out of his office, closing the door behind him. Sophia stood and came to stand near Owen, though not too close. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. I know this isn't what you wanted. It's not really what I wanted either. I came west hoping for a fresh start, but I never meant to take anything from you. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But this ranch is legally half mine, just as it's half yours. We both have a claim to it, and neither of us wants to see it sold to strangers. So what are you suggesting? Owen kept his eyes on the street outside. Give me a chance. Give us a chance to make this partnership work. I know I don't know anything about ranching, but I can learn. I'm strong, I'm not afraid of hard work, and I'm not stupid. Teach me what I need to know. Let me prove I can contribute. She moved slightly closer. If after a reasonable time, say 6 months, you truly believe we can't work together, then we'll sell the ranch and split the proceeds. But at least give it a chance. Owen turned to look at her. In the light from the window, her green eyes were steady and honest. She wasn't pleading, wasn't trying to manipulate him with feminine weakness. She was proposing a business arrangement, partner to partner. 6 months, he said slowly. You work the ranch alongside me and the hands. You learn everything, do your share. No special treatment because you're a woman. If you can't handle it, if you make decisions that damage the operation, the partnership ends. Agreed. Sophia held out her hand. And the same goes for you. If you try to freeze me out, make decisions without me, or treat me like an unwelcome burden rather than a legitimate partner, I have the right to call for the sale. Owen took her hand, sealing the agreement. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. They were both fighting for their futures, both risking everything on this impossible situation. Then I guess we're partners, Owen said. I guess we are. They returned to Patterson's office and explained their decision. The lawyer drew up a simple agreement outlining their 6-month trial partnership, both of them signing it and having it witnessed. By the time they left, it was past noon, and Redding was bustling with activity. We should get supplies before we head back, Owen said. If you're staying, you'll need proper work clothes. That dress won't last a week on the ranch. They stopped at the general store, where Owen helped Sophia select practical items. Sturdy skirts and blouses, a wide-brimmed hat to protect from the sun, boots that could handle rough terrain. The store owner, Mrs. Chen, was openly curious about the woman shopping with Owen Lancaster, but she was too polite to ask direct questions. Owen knew the gossip would be all over town by evening, but there was nothing to be done about it. As they loaded the supplies onto the horses, Owen noticed Sophia looking at something in the window of the milliner's shop next door. It was a simple hat, nothing fancy, but there was longing in her expression. You like that? He asked. Sophia shook her head quickly. Just looking. I have a hat now. She gestured to the practical wide-brimmed one they just purchased. Owen looked at the hat in the window again. It was prettier than the work hat, with a ribbon that would bring out the green in her eyes. Before he could think better of it, he went into the shop and bought it. When he came out and handed it to Sophia, she looked stunned. Why did you do that? She asked. Owen shrugged, feeling awkward. Consider it a welcome present. If we're going to be partners, might as well start off right. Sophia's eyes grew bright with what might have been tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to do that. I know." Owen mounted his horse, suddenly eager to be back on familiar ground. "Let's head home." The ride back to the ranch was more comfortable than the ride into town. They talked about what Sophia needed to learn, about the rhythm of ranch life, about the cattle market and the challenges ahead. Owen found himself explaining things in detail, surprised by how engaged she was, how good her questions were. She wasn't just listening politely, she was genuinely trying to understand. Over the following weeks, Sophia threw herself into learning ranch life with a determination that surprised everyone. She was up before dawn, working alongside Maria first to master the household tasks, then venturing out to learn from the ranch hands. Carlos took her under his wing, teaching her about horses and cattle with patient good humor. She learned to mend fences, to recognize signs of illness in livestock, to read the weather and the land. Owen watched her progress with grudging admiration. She wasn't naturally gifted at ranch work, and she made plenty of mistakes. But she never made the same mistake twice, and she never complained. When she fell off a horse while learning to rope cattle, she got back on with nothing more than a rueful laugh and determination in her eyes. When the work left her hands blistered and bleeding, she bandaged them and returned the next day. "She's got spirit, that one," Carlos said to Owen one evening as they watched Sophia help move a stubborn cow and her calf to a different pasture. "Reminds me of your mother. She had that same fire." Owen couldn't deny it. His mother had been Eastern-born too, had come west as a young bride and learned to love this hard land. She'd worked beside his father every day until illness took her when Owen was 15. He'd forgotten what it was like to have that kind of partnership, that shared purpose. But he reminded himself this was temporary. Sophia was learning because she needed to, because it made sense for the partnership. Once the 6 months were up, they'd reassess, and likely she'd take her half of the sale price and return to civilization. Women didn't stay in places like this unless they had to, except Sophia seemed to be thriving. As October turned to November, Owen noticed changes in her. The pallor from city life faded, replaced by a healthy sun-kissed glow. She moved with more confidence, her body adapting to the physical demands. She laughed more freely with Maria and the hands, her reserve melting away. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, Owen caught her staring at the landscape with an expression of pure joy. They fell into a routine. Mornings started with checking on the animals and planning the day's work. Sophia would take one set of tasks, Owen another, and they'd meet back at the house for the midday meal that Maria prepared. Evenings were for paperwork, which Owen taught Sophia to understand. She had a head for numbers, he discovered, and caught several small accounting errors he'd overlooked. "You're good at this," he said one night as she worked through the ledgers. "My father was a banker," Sophia replied without looking up. "He taught me bookkeeping when I was young, said numbers don't lie, unlike people." There was bitterness in her voice. Of course, he turned out to be wrong about that too. Owen wanted to ask more about her father, about what had happened in Boston, but he held back. They were partners, not friends. Getting too personal would complicate things when the time came to part ways. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The trouble started in mid-November when a man named Richard Blackwell rode onto the ranch. He was well dressed in expensive Eastern clothes, riding a horse that had cost more than Owen made in a year. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Owen Lancaster," Blackwell called out as Owen emerged from the barn. "I've been looking for you. You found me. What can I do for you? Owen's instincts were already prickled. Something about this man set his teeth on edge. I represent a consortium of investors interested in purchasing land in this area. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for your ranch. Blackwell dismounted, pulling papers from his saddlebag. Shall we discuss this inside? Not interested, Owen said flatly. The double L isn't for sale. Everyone has their price, Mr. Lancaster, at least hear the offer. I said no. Owen's voice hardened. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Perhaps your partner might feel differently. Blackwell's smile grew sharper. Miss Sophia Hayes, isn't it? I understand she owns 50% of this property. Maybe she'd be interested in selling her share. Owen felt cold fury wash over him. How do you know about Miss Hayes? I make it my business to know things. Land deals, ownership records, partnership agreements. Blackwell looked around the ranch with an evaluating eye. This is prime property, Lancaster. Right amount of water, good grazing, close enough to town. My employers are willing to pay top dollar. And I'm willing to throw you off my land if you don't leave right now. Owen took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. Blackwell held up his hands in mock surrender. No need for threats, I'll go, but I'll leave my offer with you anyway. When Miss Hayes decides she's tired of playing cowgirl and wants to return to civilization, she'll have a buyer ready and waiting. He dropped an envelope on the ground and remounted his horse. Give her my regards. Owen watched him ride away, then picked up the envelope. Inside was an offer for $6,000, more than the ranch was worth, which meant Blackwell's employers wanted the land badly enough to overpay. That never meant anything good. Sophia came out of the house as Blackwell disappeared down the road. Who was that? Owen handed her the envelope. Someone trying to buy the ranch, or specifically trying to buy your half of it. Sophia read the offer, her eyebrows rising. $6,000, that's more than Patterson estimated, which should tell you something's wrong. Owen crossed his arms. Nobody pays above value unless they have a reason. My guess is there's something on this land they want, or they're planning to consolidate properties for some bigger scheme. Well, they can want all they like. I'm not selling. Sophia handed the envelope back. You might want to keep that, though, in case they cause trouble, evidence of their interest. Owen felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. You're sure? That's a lot of money. I'm sure. Sophia met his eyes steadily. I didn't come all this way to give up at the first bribe. This ranch is my future too, Owen. I'm not walking away from it. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something about hearing it from her lips made Owen's heart skip. He pushed the feeling away, reminding himself not to read too much into it. She was just being a good partner. But over the following weeks, it became harder to maintain that professional distance. They were together constantly, working side by side, sharing meals, discussing plans for the ranch. Owen found himself noticing small things. The way Sophia tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the sound of her laugh when Carlos told one of his terrible jokes, the fierce intelligence in her eyes when she was solving a problem. Winter came to Northern California, bringing cold rains that turned the ranch into mud. It was miserable work, checking on cattle in the downpour, repairing damage from the storms, keeping everything running. But Sophia never faltered. She'd pull on her oilskin coat and wade into the muck alongside everyone else, her face set with determination. One particularly bad afternoon, they were working together to reinforce a fence that was threatening to collapse under the weight of fallen branches. The rain was coming down in sheets, making visibility poor and the work treacherous. Owen was hammering in a support post when he heard Sophia cry out. He spun to see her falling, her boot having slipped in the mud. She was heading toward a tangle of barbed wire, and Owen moved without thinking. He lunged forward, catching her around the waist and pulling her against him as they both went down in the mud, away from the dangerous wire. They landed hard, Sophia on top of Owen, both of them covered in cold mud and rain. For a moment, they just lay there, breathing hard. Then Sophia lifted her head and looked down at him, and Owen found himself staring into her green eyes from inches away. "You saved me," she said, her voice breathless. "Couldn't let my partner get hurt," Owen replied, but his voice came out rougher than he intended. They were so close. Owen could feel the warmth of her body against his despite the cold rain, could see the individual drops of water clinging to her eyelashes. Her lips were slightly parted, and for one wild moment, he wanted nothing more than to pull her down and kiss her. Then Sophia seemed to realize their position and scrambled off him quickly, her cheeks flushing. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drag you down too." "It's fine." Owen stood, offering her a hand up. When she took it, he felt that same electric current he'd felt the day they shook hands in Patterson's office. "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride." Sophia tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "Thank you, Owen. That barbed wire could have done real damage." They finished the fence work in awkward silence, both hyper-aware of the other. That night, Owen lay in bed thinking about the feel of Sophia in his arms, the look in her eyes, and he knew he was in dangerous territory. He couldn't afford to have feelings for her. In a few months, they'd decide what to do with the ranch, and even if they stayed partners, that didn't mean anything else. She was educated, refined, from a completely different world. Once she'd secured her future here, she'd probably find some appropriate man to marry, someone who could give her the life she deserved. The thought of Sophia with someone else made Owen's chest ache, but he forced himself to ignore it. Christmas came, and Maria insisted they celebrate properly. She decorated the house with pine boughs and cooked an elaborate feast. Carlos and the other hands joined them, along with some neighbors from surrounding ranches. It was the most festive the Double L had been in years. Sophia seemed to glow in the candlelight, laughing and chatting with everyone. She'd become friends with Maria, with Carlos and his children, with the neighboring ranch wives. She belonged here in a way Owen hadn't expected, fitting into the community like she'd always been part of it. During the dancing after dinner, tradition demanded Owen dance with Sophia. He'd been avoiding it, but Maria pushed them together with a knowing smile. Owen took Sophia's hand and drew her into a simple waltz, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. "This is nice," Sophia said softly. "A real family Christmas. We didn't have this in Boston, especially not after my father died." "Do you miss it?" "Boston?" Owen asked, needing to know. Sophia was quiet for a moment as they moved across the floor. "Sometimes I miss what it was before everything fell apart, but I don't miss the person I was there." That Sophia was lost, just going through the motions of living. "Here I feel alive, like I matter, like what I do has purpose." "You do matter," Owen said before he could stop himself. "The ranch runs better with you here. You've made a real difference." Sophia looked up at him, and in her eyes, Owen saw something that made his breath catch. It wasn't just gratitude or partnership. It was something deeper, something that matched the feelings he'd been trying to suppress in himself. The moment was broken when Carlos cut in, claiming his own dance with Sophia and winking at Owen. The rest of the night passed in a blur, and Owen found himself watching Sophia constantly, wondering if he'd imagined what he'd seen in her eyes. The new year of 1877 brought new challenges. In January, several of their cattle went missing. It started with just a few, easy to attribute to predators or straying. But when the numbers kept growing, Owen knew they had a bigger problem. Rustlers, Carlos said grimly after they'd found evidence of organized theft. They're hitting several ranches in the area, always taking just enough to avoid major attention. Owen gathered the hands to organize patrols, determined to protect their herd. Sophia insisted on participating, despite his protests. "We're partners," she said firmly. "That means facing the dangers together too. I can ride and shoot. Let me help." She could shoot. Owen had discovered that during target practice weeks ago, when Sophia had revealed her father had taught her to handle firearms. She wasn't expert, but she was competent enough to defend herself. They spent several cold nights keeping watch over the herd, taking turns at different vantage points. Owen found himself paired with Sophia more often than not, the two of them sharing the darkness and the quiet. "Tell me about your father," Sophia said one night as they sat their horses overlooking the main pasture. "What was he like?" Owen considered the question. "Strong, quiet, fair. He never asked anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He built this ranch from nothing because he refused to quit, even when it would have been easier to give up. He sounds like someone I would have liked to know." Sophia pulled her coat tighter against the chill. "My father was different, charming, quick to laugh. Everyone loved him. But there was a weakness in him. When things got hard, he took the easy path, the shortcuts. That's what destroyed us." "You're not like that," Owen said. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." Sophia turned to look at him, surprise clear on her face even in the dim moonlight. "You really think so?" "I know so. I've watched you these past months. You could have given up 100 times, could have taken Blackwell's money and gone back east. But you stayed, and you fought for this place like it was yours from the beginning." Owen's voice was rough with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "That takes real strength. I stayed because I didn't want to lose this." Sophia gestured at the ranch spread below them, "but also because I didn't want to lose the chance to work with you. You've taught me so much, been so patient even when I knew you didn't want me here. You gave me a chance when you could have fought me legally, made everything difficult. That meant everything to me." They looked at each other, and Owen felt the moment stretching between them, full of unspoken words and barely restrained feelings. He wanted to tell her that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being an unwanted partner and become essential to his life. That he couldn't imagine the ranch without her now, couldn't imagine his days without seeing her smile or hearing her laugh. That he was falling in love with her, had probably been falling for months. But before he could find the words, they heard movement in the darkness. Both tensed, hands moving to their rifles. Shapes appeared in the moonlight, men on horses approaching the herd with clear intent. "Stay here," Owen whispered. "I'll circle around and confront them. If shooting starts, ride for help." "Absolutely not." Sophia's voice was firm. "We face this together." There was no time to argue. Owen fired a warning shot into the air and chaos erupted. The rustlers, startled at being caught, scattered in different directions. Owen spurred his horse forward, chasing one group while Sophia went after another. He heard her shouting, heard the crack of her rifle, and his heart was in his throat even as he pursued his own targets. The rustlers were more interested in escape than confrontation. Within minutes, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind the cattle they'd been trying to steal. Owen circled back frantically, searching for Sophia in the darkness. He found her near the edge of the pasture, still mounted, rifle in hand, breathing hard but unharmed. Relief flooded through him so intensely it was almost painful. "Are you okay?" he demanded, riding up beside her. "I'm fine." "They ran as soon as I fired. I think I winged one of them, but they kept going." Sophia lowered her rifle, and he could see her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Did we stop them?" "Yeah." Owen dismounted and reached up to help her down. When her boots hit the ground, she swayed slightly, and he steadied her with his hands on her shoulders. You did good. That was brave and foolish in equal measure. Partners, Sophia repeated, looking up at him. That's what we are. Owen couldn't help himself anymore. With her standing so close, her face tilted up toward his, her lips slightly parted, all his carefully maintained control shattered. He pulled her against him and kissed her for a moment. Sophia went still with surprise. Then she was kissing him back, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, her body pressing against his. The kiss was everything Owen hadn't let himself imagine, urgent and sweet and full of months of restrained longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia's eyes were bright with emotion. "Owen," she whispered. "I'm sorry," he said, though he wasn't, not even remotely. "I shouldn't have done that." "Yes, you should have." Sophia's hand came up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "You should have done it weeks ago, months ago, maybe. You feel it too," Owen hardly dared to ask. "Every day." Sophia smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I've been in love with you since you caught me in the mud and saved me from the barbed wire. Maybe before that. I just didn't think you could feel the same way about me. Not feel the same way. Sophia, you've turned my entire world upside down. I think I started falling for you the moment you stood on my porch and refused to back down, even though you must have been terrified. You're the strongest, most beautiful, most infuriating woman I've ever met, and I don't want to be just your partner." Owen pulled her close again, resting his forehead against hers. "I want to be yours, completely." Sophia laughed, a sound of pure joy. "You already are. You have been for a long time." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "We should get back," Owen said reluctantly. "Report what happened, make sure the cattle are all accounted for." "And then?" Sophia asked, her hand finding his. "And then we figure out what comes next." Owen squeezed her hand gently. Together. The news of the Rustler attack spread quickly, and the community rallied. Owen reported the incident to the sheriff, who organized a coordinated effort among the ranchers to patrol the area. Within a week, they'd caught 3 of the rustlers, and the theft stopped. The crisis had brought the community closer together, and the Double L was now seen as part of that community, with Sophia accepted as much as Owen. But the bigger change was between Owen and Sophia themselves. They no longer tried to hide their feelings, though they were discreet about it for propriety's sake. Maria knew, of course, and beamed at them constantly. Carlos made terrible jokes about Owen finally finding a woman who could keep up with him. The other hands treated Sophia with the respect due to the boss's woman, which seemed to make her both proud and embarrassed. In early February, on a clear, cold morning, Owen asked Sophia to ride out with him to check on the northern pastures. They rode in comfortable silence, their horses walking side by side. When they reached a high point overlooking the valley, Owen dismounted and helped Sophia down. "I've been thinking," he said, holding both her hands in his. "About the ranch, about our partnership agreement, about what happens when the 6 months are up." Sophia's expression became guarded. And I don't want anything to change, except I want to make it permanent." Owen took a breath, his heart pounding. "Marry me, Sophia. Be my wife, my partner, my everything. Help me run this ranch not because of a deed and a partnership agreement, but because it's ours together, because we're building something that matters." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You want to marry me? Are you certain?" "I come with nothing, Owen. No dowry, no connections, no family wealth. You came with yourself, and that's more than enough. You're everything I didn't know I needed." Owen pulled her closer. "I love you, Sophia Hayes. Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out as a laugh and a sob at once. "Yes, of course I'll marry you. I love you too, Owen Lancaster. so much it scares me sometimes." Owen kissed her then, putting everything he felt into it, his love, his commitment, his promise of a future together. When they pulled apart, Sophia was crying openly, happy tears that she didn't try to hide. "When?" she asked. "When should we marry?" "As soon as possible." Owen grinned. "I've wasted enough time being stubborn and trying to pretend I didn't love you. I don't want to waste any more." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Reading. The whole community turned out for the wedding, filling the pews with friends and neighbors who'd come to care for both of them. Sophia wore a simple but beautiful dress that Maria and the other ranch wives had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that were just starting to bloom despite the winter chill. Owen had never seen anything as beautiful as Sophia walking toward him down that aisle, her green eyes locked on his, her smile radiant. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges came, he meant every word with his whole heart. The celebration afterward at the ranch was joyous and loud, with music and dancing and more food than Owen had ever seen. Carlos gave a toast about how Owen had needed a woman strong enough to lasso his stubborn heart, which made everyone laugh, including Owen himself. Maria cried happy tears and hugged them both so hard Owen thought his ribs might crack. But the best part was when the guests finally left, and Owen and Sophia were alone for the first time as husband and wife. They stood on the porch of the house, now fully theirs together, looking out at the land stretching into the darkness. "Happy?" Owen asked, his arm around Sophia's waist, "more than I ever thought possible." Sophia leaned into him. "When I got on that stagecoach in Boston, I was so scared. I had no idea what I'd find here, if you'd accept me or fight me, if I could survive this life. I never imagined I'd find home, find love. I didn't know I was looking for either of those things," Owen admitted. "I thought I had everything I needed. Then you showed up with your deed and your determination and turned everything upside down. Best thing that ever happened to me." Sophia turned in his arms to face him. "So what do we do now? Now we live." Owen kissed her gently. "We run this ranch together, build our future together, face whatever comes together. We make a life that's bigger and better than anything either of us could have made alone." "I like the sound of that." Sophia's smile was soft and full of love. "Let's go inside, husband. I want to start that future right now." Owen swept her into his arms, making her laugh, and carried her over the threshold of their home. Their life together was just beginning, but he already knew it would be everything he'd ever wanted and more. The following months proved him right. Spring came to Northern California, bringing green grass and new calves and long sunny days. Owen and Sophia worked side by side as they always had, but now there was an ease between them, a joy that suffused everything they did. They made decisions together, planned improvements together, celebrated successes and weathered setbacks together. Sophia continued to amaze Owen with her capability. She'd become a skilled rider and a competent ranch hand, but she'd also brought her own strengths to the operation. Her bookkeeping kept their finances organized and helped them make smart decisions about when to sell cattle and what investments to make. Her people skills helped smooth over conflicts and build stronger relationships with their neighbors and business partners. The ranch was genuinely better with her as a full partner. In June, Richard Blackwell returned, this time with a higher offer. Sophia stood beside Owen on the porch as the land speculator made his pitch, and when he finished, she was the one who responded. "Mr. Blackwell, I think you need to understand something. This ranch isn't just a piece of property to us. It's our home, our livelihood, our future. My husband's father and my grandmother built this place from nothing because they believed in something bigger than money. We honor their legacy by continuing that work." Her voice was firm and clear. "No amount of money will convince us to sell. Not 6,000, not 10,000, not any amount. Please don't come back with another offer." Blackwell's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. My employers don't like taking no for an answer. Then your employers are going to be disappointed." Owen stepped forward, his hand resting casually near his gun. "Because the answer is no, and it will always be no. Now get off our land." Blackwell left, and they never heard from him again. Whatever scheme he and his employers had been planning, they apparently moved on to easier targets. The threat that had once loomed over them faded away, just one more challenge they'd faced and overcome together. By fall, Sophia was pregnant with their first child. Owen was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure, hovering over her constantly until she finally laughed and told him she was carrying a baby, not made of glass. Maria took charge of making sure Sophia didn't overwork herself, enlisting the ranch hands in a conspiracy to keep her from doing anything too strenuous. "I'm still working," Sophia protested when Owen tried to keep her in the house. "I'm pregnant, not an invalid." "I know, but humor me." Owen pulled her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "You're carrying our child, Sophia, our family. I just want to keep you both safe." Sophia softened, touching his face gently. "We're safe. We have you, we have this place, we have a community that cares about us. Our baby will be born into all that love and security. That's everything that matters." Their son was born in March of 1878, during a late-night rainstorm that reminded Owen of the day Sophia had arrived. The birth was hard, and Owen spent hours pacing outside while Maria and the doctor tended to Sophia. When he finally heard his son's first cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. "You can come in now," Maria called, beaming. Owen entered the bedroom to find Sophia propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she said softly. Owen approached slowly, almost afraid this was a dream. But when Sophia placed the baby in his arms, the weight was real. The tiny face scrunched up and red was real. The feeling of overwhelming love was real. "He's perfect," Owen managed, his voice choked with emotion. "You're perfect. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for this, for everything." They named him Thomas, after Owen's father, with the middle name James for Sophia's grandfather. Little Thomas Lancaster was welcomed into the world with joy by everyone on the ranch. Carlos carved him a wooden horse. Maria knitted enough clothes for 3 babies, and the neighboring families came by with gifts and well wishes. Owen discovered that fatherhood transformed him in ways he hadn't expected. He'd always been responsible, always worked hard, but now everything had new meaning. He was building this ranch not just for himself or even for Sophia, but for Thomas and whatever other children might come. He was creating a legacy, a place where his family could thrive for generations. Sophia blossomed as a mother, her love for their son evident in every gentle touch and soft song. But she also refused to stop being a partner in the ranch. Once she'd recovered from the birth, she was back to working, though now with Thomas strapped to her back in a sling that Maria had made. Owen would find them in the barn, Sophia checking on horses with their son sleeping peacefully against her, or in the office, Sophia reviewing accounts with Thomas watching her with serious baby eyes. "You're going to raise him to be as stubborn as you are," Owen said one evening, watching Sophia teach Thomas to reach for a rattle. "I certainly hope so." Sophia grinned at him. "Stubborn people build ranches and fight for their futures. Stubborn people fall in love against all odds. I want our son to have that strength." Their family grew. A daughter, Elizabeth, came in 1880, named for Sophia's mother. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's determination, evident from the moment she was born, howling her displeasure at the world. A second son, Daniel, arrived in 1882, quieter than his siblings but with a clever mind that was always observing, always learning. The ranch grew too. With careful management and hard work, they expanded their herd and their land. They built a new barn, dug additional wells, and hired more permanent hands to help with the increased work. The Double L became one of the most respected ranches in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. But more than the success, more than the growth, what Owen treasured most was the life they'd built. Summer evenings sitting on the porch with Sophia, watching their children play in the yard. Winter nights gathered around the fire, Thomas reading from a book while Elizabeth practiced her letters and Daniel built elaborate structures with wooden blocks. The daily rhythm of working together, supporting each other, loving each other through good times and challenging ones. Richard Blackwell's attempts to buy the ranch had been just the first of several challenges they faced. There were droughts that tested their resources, market downturns that hurt their profits, a fire that destroyed part of the original barn. But they faced everything together, and somehow that made even the hardest times bearable. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1887, Owen took Sophia back to the hilltop where he'd proposed. Their children were with Maria for the day, giving them rare time alone. They stood looking out over the valley, seeing not just what was but remembering what had been. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked. "Coming west, giving up the chance for an easier life somewhere else?" Sophia turned to him, her face showing the maturity of a woman who'd lived through joy and hardship both, but her eyes were still the same clear green that had captivated him from the first. Not for a single moment. "This life, this place, you and our children, this is everything I never knew I was searching for. I think about that day you arrived with your deed." Owen pulled her close. "I was so angry, so convinced you were going to ruin everything I'd built. I couldn't see that you weren't here to take anything from me. You were here to give me everything I'd been missing." "We gave it to each other," Sophia corrected. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. You taught me to be strong, to believe in myself. You loved me when I felt unlovable." "That's not a small thing, Owen. Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did." Owen kissed her forehead. "Once I stopped being too stubborn to admit it anyway." Sophia laughed. "We were both stubborn. That's probably why we work so well together." They stayed on the hilltop until sunset, talking about their plans for the future, about their hopes for their children, about the next 10 years and the 10 after that. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the house lights were glowing warm and welcoming, and they could hear their children's voices calling for them. "That's home," Sophia said softly, and Owen heard the wonder in her voice, the gratitude that this was theirs. "That's home," he agreed. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Thomas grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did, already learning to manage the cattle and work alongside the hands. Elizabeth was fierce and independent, insisting on learning everything her brother learned, refusing to be limited by being a girl. Daniel was quieter but brilliant, his mind drawn to understanding how things worked, already talking about new techniques and methods for improving the ranch operation. Owen and Sophia watched their children grow with pride and occasional terror. Raising children was harder than anything they'd done on the ranch, filled with difficult decisions and constant worry. But it was also the most rewarding work of their lives, seeing these 3 people they'd created becoming who they were meant to be. In 1892, when Thomas turned 14 and started talking about his future on the ranch, Owen and Sophia sat him down for a serious conversation. "This place will be yours someday," Owen said. "You and your brother and sister, all of you will inherit it equally, but I want you to understand what that means. This isn't just land and cattle, it's a legacy, a responsibility." "I know, Pa." Thomas looked so much like Owen had at that age it was startling. "You and Ma built this from a partnership that could have failed. You made it into something that matters. I want to honor that." "Your grandmother Whitmore and my father built it first," Sophia added. "They believed in partnership, in working together even when they were apart. That's what this ranch represents. Not just individual effort, but collaboration, trust, shared vision." "And love," Owen said, reaching for Sophia's hand. "Don't forget that part. This ranch thrives because your mother and I love each other, support each other, make each other stronger. Whatever you do in life, find someone who does that for you. That's the real secret to success." Thomas nodded seriously, taking in their words. Owen saw understanding in his son's eyes, the beginning of wisdom that would serve him well in the future. The turn of the century brought changes to California and to the ranching industry. The railroad reached further, opening new markets but also bringing new competition. New technologies emerged, changing how ranches operated. But the Double L adapted, as it always had, with Owen and Sophia making decisions together about how to modernize while preserving what mattered most. By 1905, Owen and Sophia had been married for nearly 30 years. Their hair had gray in it now, and their bodies moved a bit slower in the mornings, but the love between them had only deepened with time. They'd grown together, their lives so intertwined that neither could imagine existence without the other. Their children were adults now. Thomas, at 27, was engaged to a neighboring rancher's daughter and already helping run the Double L as a full partner. Elizabeth, 25, had shocked everyone by going to college in San Francisco and becoming a teacher, though she came home every summer to work the ranch. Daniel, 23, had his own ideas about scientific ranching and was implementing new techniques that were improving their yields. One evening, Owen and Sophia sat on the porch as they had thousands of times before. The ranch was quiet, the work done for the day, the sun setting in glory over the California hills. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the light change. "You remember that first morning?" Sophia asked suddenly. "When you poured 2 cups of coffee and said, 'Let's talk'?" Owen smiled. "I was terrified, convinced you were going to destroy everything I'd built. I could barely stand to look at you. And now I can't imagine a moment without you." Owen brought her hand to his lips. "You didn't destroy anything, Sophia. You made everything possible. Every good thing in my life came from the day you arrived with that deed." "We made it possible together," Sophia said. "That's what partnership means. That's what love means." They sat together as darkness fell. 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something that would outlast them both. The ranch would go on, passed to their children and their children's children. But more than the land or the cattle or the buildings, they'd leave behind a legacy of love, of partnership, of 2 people who chose each other every day and built a life that mattered. Inside the house, they could hear Thomas talking with his fiancée, making plans for their wedding and their future. They could see lights in the windows of the houses they'd built for their ranch hands, the families that had become their extended family. The Double L wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a community, a place where people came together and built lives worth living. "Happy?" Owen asked, as he had so many times over the years. "Always," Sophia replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "With you always." They sat together on the porch of their home, the home they'd built together, and watched the stars come out over California. 2 people who'd started as unwilling partners and become everything to each other. Their story had begun with a deed and a cup of coffee, but it had become something much greater. A love story for the ages, a testament to what was possible when two stubborn people refused to give up on each other or their dreams. The Wild West had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately given them everything. And as they sat together in the peaceful evening, Owen Lancaster and Sophia Hayes Lancaster knew that every challenge, every struggle, every moment of doubt had been worth it to arrive at this. A life built on love, partnership, and the unshakable bond between two people who chose each other, every single day for the rest of their lives. Years continued to roll by like the seasons that marked them, each bringing new joys and challenges to the Double L Ranch. Thomas married in the spring of 1906, and by 1907, Owen and Sophia became grandparents for the first time when Thomas and his wife Clara welcomed a son. Holding his grandson for the first time, Owen felt the weight of generations, the continuation of what he and Sophia had built. "Your great-grandfather Thomas would be proud," Owen whispered to the sleeping baby. "And your great-great-grandmother Margaret." All of this started because they believed in partnership, in building something bigger than themselves. Sophia stood beside him, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband with their grandson. "We did it," she said softly. "We took that partnership and turned it into all of this. A family, a legacy, a future." Elizabeth returned home more frequently as she grew older, finally admitting that while she loved teaching, her heart belonged to the ranch. In 1908, she married one of the ranch hands who'd worked for them for years, a steady man who loved the land as much as she did. They built a house on the eastern portion of the property, and Elizabeth began breeding horses, adding a new dimension to the ranch's operations. Daniel, ever the innovator, traveled to universities and agricultural colleges, learning new techniques and bringing them back to implement on the Double L. His improvements increased their efficiency and profits, ensuring the ranch would remain competitive in the changing 20th century. He married a woman he met at a college lecture, a biologist who shared his passion for understanding the natural world, and they built a life divided between the ranch and their research. By 1910, Owen and Sophia had stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, letting their children take over while they served as advisors and enjoyed watching their grandchildren grow. They had 5 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and the ranch was thriving under the next generation's care. But Owen and Sophia's partnership never wavered. They still rode out together to check on the land, still sat together in the evening reviewing the books, still made major decisions as a team. Their children and grandchildren saw in them a model of what marriage could be. Two people who worked together, supported each other, loved each other through every season of life. One afternoon in 1912, John Patterson, now well into his 70s, came out to the ranch for a visit. He'd retired from law practice but remained a friend. Over coffee, he pulled out a folder that looked familiar. "I was organizing my files and came across this," he said, laying out the original partnership deed that Sophia had brought to his office 36 years earlier. "Thought you might want it for your family records." Owen and Sophia studied the yellowed document, reading the formal language that had brought them together. Thomas Lancaster and Margaret Whitmore, equal partners in the purchase and operation of the property known as the Double L Ranch. "My father and your grandmother probably never imagined how this would turn out," Owen said to Sophia. "They probably thought they were just making a business arrangement. But they created the foundation for everything that came after," Sophia replied. "Their partnership made our partnership possible, and our partnership created all of this." She gestured at the window, where they could see their grandchildren playing in the yard. their children working together on various ranch projects, the thriving operation that supported not just their family, but dozens of workers and their families. Patterson smiled. I remember the day you two came into my office. Owen, you looked like you wanted to throw Miss Hayes off your land. And Miss Hayes, you looked like you were ready to fight for every inch of that land with your bare hands if necessary. I was, Sophia admitted with a laugh. I'd lost everything else. That deed was my last hope. And I was so angry, Owen added, so convinced that she was going to ruin everything. I couldn't see past my own stubbornness to realize she was the best thing that could have happened to me. Well, you figured it out eventually, Patterson said. And you've built something remarkable. Not just a successful ranch, but a real family legacy. Your children are already teaching your grandchildren about partnership, about working together, about building something that matters. That's the real wealth you've created. After Patterson left, Owen and Sophia walked out to the hilltop where Owen had proposed all those years ago. It had become a tradition for them, coming here on important occasions to remember and reflect. 35 years, Owen said, looking out over the valley. 35 years since you stepped off that stagecoach and changed my life. Changed both our lives, Sophia corrected, slipping her hand into his. Their hands fit together perfectly, worn and weathered by years of work, but still strong, still capable of holding on to what mattered. You ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Owen asked. If your mother had responded to my father's letters, if she'd claimed her share earlier, if you'd sold that deed in Boston instead of coming west. Sophia considered this. I think about it sometimes. I'd probably have spent that $500 trying to survive in Boston, ended up in some factory, or married to some man I didn't love because I needed security. I'd have been safe, maybe, but I wouldn't have been happy. I wouldn't have been alive the way I am here. And I'd have kept running this ranch alone, Owen said. Probably never married because I was too stubborn and set in my ways to let anyone in. I'd have the land and the cattle and nothing else that mattered. It would have been a hollow life. Instead, we got this. Sophia leaned against him. We got love, family, a partnership that made us both better than we were alone. We got to build something that will outlast us. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Owen wrapped his arms around his wife, feeling the familiar comfort of her presence. They'd been through so much together. The struggles of those early months, the rustlers, the droughts and floods, the challenges of building a family and a business simultaneously. There had been arguments and disagreements, moments of doubt and fear. But through it all, they'd held on to each other, never letting go of what they'd found that day when Owen poured 2 cups of coffee and said, "Let's talk." The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In the valley below, they could see the ranch lights beginning to glow, warm and welcoming. Smoke rose from chimneys, and if they listened carefully, they could hear the distant sound of children's laughter, the lowing of cattle settling for the night, all the sounds of a life being lived fully. We should head back, Sophia said eventually. Clara's making dinner and you know how Thomas gets if we're late. He's become quite the family man, Owen said with pride. All 3 of them have. They're going to carry this forward beautifully. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, Owen thought about legacy, about what they were leaving behind. It wasn't just the land or the buildings or the cattle. It was the example they'd set, the model of partnership and love they'd created. Their children had seen 2 people who worked as equals, who respected each other, who built a life together based on mutual support and genuine affection. That was worth more than any material wealth. Dinner that evening was a joyful chaos. with all three of their children's families gathered around the big table that Thomas had built to accommodate everyone. The grandchildren chattered and laughed. The adults discussed ranch business and family news, and Owen and Sophia sat at the head of the table, watching it all with deep contentment. "Pa, we've been talking," Thomas said during a lull in conversation. "And we want to officially change the ranch name. It's been the double L for Grandpa Lancaster and now for you. But it should honor both families, both partnerships. We think it should be the double L Ranch, Lancaster and Hayes, partners since 1858. Owen looked at Sophia, seeing tears in her eyes that matched his own. Their children wanted to honor both of them, both families, both of the partnerships that had created this place. "What do you think?" Owen asked Sophia quietly. "I think it's perfect," Sophia whispered. "It tells the truth of what this place is. Not one person's dream, but a shared vision, a partnership that has endured and thrived." "Then that's what we'll do," Owen announced to the table. "Lancaster and Hayes, partners since 1858. That's what this ranch is and always has been." The family cheered, and Daniel raised his glass in a toast. "To partnerships, to family, to the legacy of working together. May the Double L Ranch continue for generations." They all drank, and Owen felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever happened in the years ahead, whatever challenges might come, this foundation would hold. They'd built something that mattered, something that would endure. The evening ended with music, as it often did. Daniel played the guitar while Elizabeth sang, their voices blending in old songs that Sophia had taught them. The grandchildren danced and played, full of energy despite the late hour. Owen and Sophia slipped away eventually, walking hand in hand to the porch of their house. "This is what happiness looks like," Sophia said, looking back at the warm lights and hearing the music and laughter. "A family that loves each other, children who are building their own good lives, grandchildren who will carry it all forward. We did this, Owen. Together." "I couldn't have done any of it without you," Owen replied. "You were the missing piece I didn't know I needed. You took a struggling ranch and a lonely man and turned them into a thriving business and a happy family. That's your gift, Sophia. You see the potential in things and bring it out. You did the same for me. When I arrived here, I was broken, lost, desperate. You gave me a chance when you could have made things difficult. You taught me to be strong, to believe in myself. You loved me when I felt unlovable." Sophia turned to face him fully. "We saved each other, Owen. That's what love does. It makes us better than we are alone." They stood together on the porch, holding each other as they'd done thousands of times over 35 years of marriage. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of grass and cattle and home. In the distance, a coyote called and one of the dogs barked in response. It was the music of the ranch, the soundtrack of their lives. "You remember what you said to me that first morning?" Sophia asked. "When you poured those 2 cups of coffee, 'Let's talk,'" Owen replied with a smile. "I thought we were going to negotiate, make a business arrangement. I had no idea I was starting a conversation that would last the rest of my life." "The best conversations never really end," Sophia said. "They just keep going deeper and richer as the years pass." "We're still having that same conversation, Owen. We're still learning about each other, still figuring out how to be partners, and still falling in love." Owen kissed her gently. "I fall in love with you over and over, Sophia. Every day gives me a new reason to be grateful you walked into my life." They returned inside eventually, to their bedroom in the house they'd shared for so many years. The bed was the same one Owen's father had built, sturdy and strong, witness to every moment of their marriage. They lay together in the darkness, Sophia's head on Owen's shoulder, their fingers intertwined. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, "for giving me a home, a family, a life worth living. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for arriving with that deed," Owen replied. "For being brave enough to come west, stubborn enough to stay, and loving enough to make a life with me. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Sophia, the very best thing." They fell asleep that way, holding each other, their hearts beating in the same steady rhythm. Outside, the ranch slept too, under a sky full of stars, secure in the knowledge that it was cared for, that the partnership that had created it would continue into the future. Owen Lancaster and Sophia Hayes Lancaster had started as strangers brought together by a legal document, two people who could have been enemies or merely reluctant business associates. Instead, through hard work, mutual respect, and growing love, they'd become true partners in every sense of the word. They'd built a ranch that was more than successful. It was a home, a legacy, a testament to what was possible when two people chose to see the best in each other and work toward a shared dream. Their story was one of courage and determination, of learning to trust and choosing to love. It was a story that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passed down through generations, as an example of what partnership and love could create. The deed that had brought Sophia to Owen's door had been the beginning of something neither could have imagined. A love that transformed them both and created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And so they lived on at the Double L Ranch, Lancaster and Hayes, partners in every way that mattered, writing the final chapters of their remarkable love story with the same commitment and devotion that had carried them through everything else. They had faced the Wild West together and built something that would outlast them both. A family, a home, and a love story that proved the best partnerships begin with a simple conversation and the willingness to see where it might lead.